Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome to July session of Ask Me Anything by the SEG Women's Network student community. My name is Rodia Tamusa. I'm currently studying Applied Geophysics at the Federal University of Technology, Akure in Nigeria, and I'm co-chair of the SEG Women's Network student community. I'm delighted to welcome our guest today, Gretchen Gillis. Gretchen Gillis is Senior Geological Consultant at Aramco Americas in Houston, where she supports oil and gas exploration and production and provides training in petroleum geoscience and scientific writing for Saudi Aramco. She began her career as exploration geologist and later served in a variety of marketing communication roles with Schlumberger. Gretchen was elected 2007 to 2010 AAPG Editor and received the AAPG Honorary Member Award in 2018. She was appointed by AAPG in 2015 to the Board of Directors of GeoScienceWorld, and she served as 2016 to 2018 Board Chair. As 2021 to 2022 AAPG President, Gretchen led the effort to set a new strategic direction for the association, resulting in the development of a proposal to merge AAPG and SPE. She was also a member of the leadership team that proposed the creation of the International Meeting for Applied Geoscience and Energy with the Society of Exploration Geophysicists, SEG. She is a Trustee Associate of the AAPG Foundation and the SEG Foundation, and she served as a Director of the SEG Foundation. Gretchen earned a bachelor's degree in geology from Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania, USA, and a master's degree in geological sciences from the University of Texas at Austin. We are very delighted to have you at in our July session, Gretchen Gillis. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you have anything to share with the audience about you to add to what I've said?
Uh, Maybe I'll just say that I belong to many associations: SEG, AAPG, SPE, and probably about 9 or 10 others. I find it very difficult to leave associations that I enjoy, but I joined each of them for a specific reason and at a specific time. And some of them are quite they're niche organizations like the Association of Earth Science Editors. I think they have only a few hundred members, but they're near and dear to my heart because when I joined, I really needed to learn a lot more about editing earth science material. So maybe my pitch at the beginning is to stay engaged with your professional and scientific organizations because they support you throughout your career and through your life.
Yes, exactly. I think it's very important for us to be part of, relevant association. Because I remembered when I reached out to you about my AWG endorsement. I don't know if you remember. So I've never met you, but because I've been active, I've been, attending some of your webinars. So I was confident to reach out to you that, okay, I needed help, and you helped me, even if you haven't met me before. And I'm very grateful for that. So to our audiences, if you have any question, please put it in the comment section below. It will be answered by Gretchen Gillis. So let's start with the question that I have at my side. So Gretchen, please could you elaborate on why you choose to become a geoscientist? Was it your decision, or was it a family member that told you to, go to study earth sciences? So can you tell us why you chose to study geoscience?
Yes, this question makes me very happy. I grew up in a large family, and my mother was an English teacher, and my father was a chemical engineer who spent most of his career working in refining and LNG. And so the thing about his career that I liked was the travel, because he saw many places throughout the world and worked on interesting projects. I didn't really care about all these miles of pipe in LNG plants or refineries, but I liked the travel. When I was in secondary school, I enjoyed my earth science class. And then when I was going to university, one of my older sisters said, "You should take a geology class because it's really interesting." So when I began my first year at Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania, I took Geology 101 and I loved it. So it was a very easy decision to focus on geology after that.
Wow, that's really nice because geoscience is not really very common in Nigeria. Like we don't really know about geoscience, like medicine, studying other very popular courses. So I got to study. I didn't choose geophysics. I wanted to study computer science, and then I got admission into geophysics because I don't know, that's the way it works in Nigeria. Sometimes they don't pick you for a course, and then you just find yourself somewhere else if you meet the cutoff mark. So, but then I was really interested. It was really interesting for me because I loved geography for my high school. I love further maths, and I'm very grateful that I find myself in studying geophysics, and that's been really interesting for me. So, can you also tell us how your day-to-day life at work as a consultant for Saudi Aramco is like? What do you do? How is it like?
Well, one of the things I really enjoy about my job right now is that every day is different. We get different service requests and support requests, and then there are things that bubble up urgently for help. A colleague might say, "Oh, I have this urgent need to learn about." Let me give an example. Let's say that there's a seismic processing technology or something, and so I try to find out what it is, who can help deliver it, what the expected results might be. So there's some technology transfer that goes along with that. We do some analog studies of work that goes on in, let's say, the Western Hemisphere, and how the ideas or techniques or technologies can be applied to advantage in Saudi Arabia. Because at the moment, Saudi Aramco's exploration and production operations are all in the country. So it's really being responsive to whatever support requests come in. There are also pretty steady requests for help with training. So I provide basic petroleum geology training to incoming engineers and geophysicists, and I really enjoy that because I get to interact with recent graduates who are very well educated, and they challenge me quite a bit. But also because we use data and examples from Saudi Arabia to study some really terrific petroleum systems, and to give everybody a common baseline for working with geoscientists in the company. I also do a fair amount of outreach. So my work with AAPG and SEG is really related to what I do because by being engaged, I keep on top of what people are doing, what's going on in technology development, which universities are really good, so that when we decide to send people for advanced degrees, sometimes I advise about which programs are really strong. So I feel like, the questions can be all over the place. But the common theme is providing technical services and technical support to the upstream areas of Saudi Aramco. I will say that I also do a fair amount of advising on communication and specifically scientific writing, because we have a lot of people who are interested in presenting and publishing with professional societies, and most companies encourage people to do that, and I like to help people do a better job, because I think writing is a skill that is undervalued. And having served as AAPG editor and on some conference committees, I think I give pretty good advice about writing, writing abstracts, writing papers, and so on. So I kind of rambled quite a bit, but the name of this session is Ask Me Anything, and maybe in my job every day is Ask Me Anything, and I just try to help.
Wow, that's really nice. I remember that I've attended one of the AAPG's program where you did it was a topic on how to write an abstract. So I attended and I really learned a lot. And I wrote my first abstract then. I submitted the abstract to a conference and I presented at that conference that year. So thank you, man.
I'm sorry, I can't hear. I'm sorry, I don't hear the question. I think you're muted.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I think the icon shows Rodiat is muted.
Yes, ma'am. Rodiat, actually, your mic is muted. Please unmute yourself and proceed the session. Thank you.
Okay, I think it's the network. So I said, how do you see women leaders? Do you believe women have to positions of leadership?
I think women can be terrific leaders. We've seen several in AAPG and within SEG. Let me think. We currently have Anna Shaughnessy as president, and I have great respect for her leadership skills, and I admire her very thoughtful and communicative leadership style. I also recall Nancy House as another president of SEG. And I'm thinking, maybe you can tell me if I'm remembering correctly. Was Eve Sprunt president of SEG? Maybe not. But there are many women who are terrific leaders. I think sometimes the way that we go about leadership can be a little different. I think many women are good listeners, and they try to understand people's attitudes and feelings about things. I think Anna is a particularly terrific example of that. Her listening skills are wonderful and something that I try to learn from because I think that's an area where I need to improve. But I think women sometimes wait until they're really extremely prepared before they raise their hand for leadership roles. I think women should consider taking the risk of leadership a little earlier. Sometimes we'll look at a job requirement or a job description and we'll say, well, I haven't done everything on that list. Well, I think if you've done half the things on the list or most of the things on the list, you probably are still qualified. So I think women should think about when they feel prepared to lead and the types of leadership roles they'd like to take on. I think every leader brings different skills to the table. And I guess I wouldn't want to generalize too much because stereotypes can be convenient, but they can also be harmful. So to say that women are always great listeners, that's a good characteristic, but not all women are. So I wouldn't want to generalize like that. But I think certainly in AAPG, I'm the fourth woman who served as president. We recently elected our fifth president-elect. I think each of us is really different experience, different characteristics, but I think we all have a sincere interest in being the best possible leaders we can be for AAPG.
Wow. Thank you so much for that answer. Yeah, I think you don't have to be fully prepared to, raise your hand at opportunities. I understand because I am currently serving as the president of my ACG's chapter in my school futsal chapter, and I didn't see myself as taking on the leadership role such as that, but when I started relating with a lot of people from the SEG, my friends, they motivated me. I'm not that kind of person to say I want to go and do a leadership position, but I was motivated. I wasn't ready. I don't like talking to the public, but somehow I just found myself there. I wasn't ready, but I learned on the job. Every day was
And
learning.
I think
So it was a
learning
learning
on the
experience.
job is something that is expected in many situations. In fact, I think if we're not learning that, then maybe we're not in the right role because we should always be trying to expand our horizons, learn new skills, improve our skills. So I think that's a sign that you're doing the right thing, that you're learning from it.
Yes, and I really like to face my fears and challenge myself. So it has really been a great journey for me, and I'm really thankful. I'm really thankful to SEG, AAPG, SPE, and all those associations for giving us students an avenue to lead. Yeah. So the next question I have from my side is that how has it been for you? Like, how do you keep your team motivated?
Well, I think in volunteer roles, I think it's often easier because everybody is there by choice and because they're looking for something and they're trying to accomplish something. You know, we want a stronger association, or we want a more diverse panel of speakers for our conference, or we want a higher quality of peer-reviewed papers. So we're all there because we have a specific reason for engagement. And so I've had tremendous luck or success with volunteers because very often they're very passionate about their volunteer opportunities and how they spend their free time. I would say that the trick is more when you're working with people in an employment situation, making sure that people are appropriately challenged and motivated without being overwhelmed. And I think one of the things I enjoy about the Aramco organization is that I think we have a very good work-life balance. I've worked in other companies where I think people probably spend a little too much of their what should be family time or volunteer time doing work for the company. And so I think maintaining an appropriate work-life balance is really good. And I sort of, as much as the COVID pandemic has been pretty terrible for a lot of people, I think it has also caused us to really look at how we spend our time. Are we spending enough time with our families? Do we enjoy our employment to the degree that we are happy to spend many hours and many years doing it? Even things like, is my commute too long? Because a lot of people, at least in the US, moved around because they wanted to optimize where they were living and working. And so I think, kind of taking stock of that is important. And certainly now that many of us are back in the office, I think I enjoy interacting with people, but I try to be more efficient about it because what I found working from home was that I was incredibly productive and efficient because I had fewer interactions, fewer phone calls, fewer people stopping by. So it was different. So I think making sure that that people are motivated has become a more complicated problem because I think COVID has caused people to really rethink boundaries, work-life balance, family time, and so on.
Well, thank you so much for that answer. I It's very important because sometimes I don't know, but it happens especially in student leadership. There are some team members that are not really interested. Maybe they just want to come there to just know that okay, this is the vice president of SEG or AAPG in school as a student. But I really find it difficult to motivate some of them because they are not interested, and sometimes I don't know what to do about it. So I don't know. Can you give me an instance of trying to build the interest of those people that you are leading, and that's aside as leaders in Nigeria, because there is high rate of unemployment in Nigeria. So it is very difficult for us to like tell the student that geophysics, geoscience is a great career. You can do a lot of things. You can be whatever you want to be, because they are not motivated. They are not seeing many examples in the country because of the state of the country. As I am talking right now, we have been out of school since February. We have been out of school since February because of bad governance. So it is really, really difficult to motivate the students. Many of them are losing interest in studying. They are losing interest in going to school. So in that kind of situation, what will you do? How can you motivate people or students?
Yeah, so I think this is an interesting question, and while I've never had the opportunity to travel to Nigeria or pretty much anywhere in Africa other than South Africa and Algeria. So I'm not expert on, or even really that familiar with how things go. But I think I've had a lot of communication from students in the last couple of years. And I recognize that it is a very difficult job market. Right now, spending by large companies on oil and gas exploration is pretty low. And the drilling rig counts are also pretty low. So, because we had this tremendous price crash when the COVID pandemic hit. And the industry is recovering somewhat, but I would say that exploration activity is still relatively low. So when exploration is not very active, employment for geologists and geophysicists the opportunities are not wonderful. I think one other thing I've observed over my career is that with technology, each geologist and each geophysicist has become much more efficient than in the past. Mm-hmm. So that's another challenge for the number of positions that are available. And so it is a tough market. I mean, I don't see a huge amount of recruiting for new geologists and geophysicists. And so it does compare a little bit to when I was graduating from the University of Texas. I was fortunate that a lot of companies came to the campus to recruit geologists and geophysicists, but most of them rejected my applications. And so finally, I was getting pretty desperate. Finally, I got a job offer. And it wasn't from the company that I thought was my very first choice or where I thought I'd want to spend my entire career, but it was a job. And so I took that position and worked very hard to learn as much as I could to be effective and productive. I think one of the things that I had to come to grips with is that I had, this idea of what my dream job was going to be, and I didn't achieve it at that time. But through my career, what I've learned is you only need one job. If you get one job, that's terrific. And while you're employed in that role, you do your work, you help the company be successful, you learn as much as you can, and as long as you're building skills, then I think you can feel like you're heading for whatever that dream position might be. So for me, I took a job in a service company in a communications role at a time when a lot of geologists and geophysicists were being let go by exploration and production companies. And I really enjoyed that work, as it turned out. And but then a few years ago, Aramco interviewed me for a job, and I wasn't quite sure what it would be, but it turns out it really has been my dream job. So it took 20 years to get there, but eventually it happened. So I would say, you have to think broadly about the skills that you can learn from a job and how that can help you build for your future. Now, sometimes it's not glamorous. I mean, I think there are some very tough jobs in the field, for example, where, how does that get me to my dream? Well, I think if you are a person who can show up on time, do the work, make things better, help your colleagues. That's important because I think those personal characteristics are so important. Now, there are lots of people who have degrees from wonderful universities, and they're very smart, and they have some great qualities. But then when you're actually working with people, it's other characteristics that make you successful. Are you a team player? Are you a good listener? Do you have a good work ethic? Do you show up on time or early every day? Or are you somebody who comes in late, has a few coffees, goes to lunch early? I mean, those are the things that really will set you apart from your peers. And so all this is to say it is a very difficult job market. I wouldn't want to be held to this prediction, but I think the energy transition, I think, is going to move less rapidly than some people would like it to. And I think it's already pretty well understood by people in the energy industry that we will continue to need a lot of oil and gas for many years to come, because even if we don't use oil or gas for transportation, there's still a lot of manufacturing that depends on our industry. So I think the opportunities will continue to be there. They may not be exactly what we want, but I think we have to be thoughtful and patient in developing our careers.
Thank you, Gretchen Gillis. So I'm very grateful for that response. So the next question I have with me is that what successful practices do you have?
Oh gosh. Well, I would say I tend to be a very punctual person. I try to follow the rules as best I can. I have a lot of respect for anyone that I think I can learn from, and that may be an intern, an assistant, somebody much younger than me, somebody older than me, people who have PhDs. I really try to learn from whoever it is that I'm working with, and I think that's helpful. Now, the downside of that is that I tend to treat everybody the same, and probably I should show more respect for people who are senior to me. But I think especially in companies, we all work together to achieve a good result. I mentioned earlier that I think writing is an important skill, and I've worked very hard to develop my writing skills. I continue to work at that. Every time I send an email message, I try to check it to make sure, is this really communicating what I want it to do, and is it going to achieve the result that I'm hoping for, whether it's an approval or a request for information or whatever. I think communication skills are really important. I think one thing that I wish I had more time for is reading. I think reading is very important, whether it's geoscience literature or information about technology. But I also try to mix in my personal reading fiction and nonfiction. So occasionally I'll read a book, like about marketing or writing, and then I'll read a work of fiction. Right now I'm actually reading a very difficult work of nonfiction, which is the 1619 Project, which is about the impact of slavery in the United States. And it's going slowly because there's so much to learn. And so I think that reading is something that I wish we all had more time for. If you could see more of my office, you'd see that there are books stacked up everywhere that are waiting to be read. So I think that's one of the things that I think we can all bring to our employment and group activities is continually learning as much as we can.
Thank you, Gretchen Gillis. So I want to read a question from one of the audiences. So from Mary Chinazakpere, she says, "Thank you, Gretchen, for your responses. Please, I would like to know if you had any challenges at work because of your gender, and how did you overcome it? Thank you."
Ah, what an interesting question. So I don't want to get myself in trouble by saying things that I shouldn't, but yeah, I would say early in my career, I probably was challenged by coworkers in ways that I wouldn't have been if I were a man. And so that was, that was interesting because especially being one of the younger, newer people in the company, it was interesting to have aggressive questioning about operational recommendations. And I think at the time I didn't really recognize it as being a result of gender issues, but looking back on it, I can see that yes, it was. I think you have to just make sure that you think about what you're doing, so that whatever work you're doing is as strong as it can be. I'd say another thing that I've run into, I think, is it is very difficult to know whether you are being paid equally with male coworkers. And I think that's been difficult to know in just about every company because salary information usually is not shared. That's something that I've managed to address quietly through networking. I think it's really important to gather data when you can. And AAPG in the past has published salary surveys related to age, number of years of experience, and academic degrees. And that's helpful for getting a general sense of whether you're being compensated fairly. So that's another thing that is, I think, specific to women, making sure that you're paid fairly. And I would say, that in my current job with Aramco, the word that I feel a lot is respect. I feel like I'm working in a very diverse team. We have all kinds of different people. We have probably an age range of 20 or 30 years within my team. And I think people are very respectful. I think whether you're a man or a woman is not a concern. It's more people giving their technical advice and opinions and insight. And so to me, that is such a lovely situation to be in, that I'm not worried about what people think of me as a woman or an older woman. I just feel like I can sit at the table and contribute and be respected and share that with others in my team. I would say that that's not always the case, and it's sort of US focused, but there was a book published last year called Gaslighted, and it was written by a sociologist at the University of Texas, and it focused on how women are treated in the oil and gas industry in the US. I think the thing that made me sad is that there are things that have not improved enough for women. And I think, I think there's still some work to do. Being comfortable with the idea of women in top leadership positions, for example. I think in terms of women's employment, some countries are much better than others in terms of things like maternity benefits. I think actually Western Europe is very good in that regard, where women can take off sometimes as much as a year and then come back to their job. That's not typical in the US. And I think that's one of the things that can be kind of discouraging. And then I think one other thing, and this also relates to COVID and it relates to everybody, is that there are people who found that they had to take a break in their employment. And many were women, some are men. I think having a break in your career should not be treated as such a negative thing. And I say that as somebody who's been employed continuously for 30 years. I think if people need to take a break, whether it's for taking care of children or relocating or helping aged parents, I don't think that having a career gap should be perceived so negatively. And I think that disproportionately hits women, but I think it shouldn't affect anybody as much as it seems to at times. So thank you for that question.
Thank you very much for the answer, Gretchen. So another question from my side is, have you ever been disrespected, and how did you respond to the circumstance?
Yes, I've been disrespected, and sometimes it comes in surprising forms. I think certainly if you are going to be the leader of an organization like president of AAPG, you have to be prepared for criticism, which sometimes can be quite disrespectful. I think I'm happy to entertain differences of opinion. I don't think that people should be subject to disrespect. And I think part of why it's surprising to me to experience that is that I don't think my path within AAPG was surprising or unexpected. I've been a volunteer for a long time. I know the organization well, and I've given it a lot of thought. What are the challenges in the organization? What changes should we make, and so on. And I think people who know me know that I've been focusing on that for a long time. So to receive disrespectful or flippant feedback was kind of interesting. It's sort of like if somebody gives you the advice about buying commodities, if they tell you buy low and sell high. Okay, that advice is so obvious. Everyone knows that. And yet for somebody to tell me that, or something similarly low level, was surprising. Now, if I took every bit of disrespect and really internalized it, I think I'd feel very bad. I think it would affect me physically or emotionally. So if I find myself getting annoyed or upset about something, I think getting up and taking a walk is a really good idea. Get some fresh air, go look at the birds, spend some of your excess energy. And really, it can be difficult, but try not to let it get to you. I think one other thing, as soon as I was finished with my term as AAPG President, I took a vacation for 2 weeks. And I really tried to get away from all the email and all of that. And I felt like that was, I came back feeling so refreshed. So whether it's a difficult assignment in your job or a big volunteer role, maintaining perspective, taking time for your health, blowing off steam, all of those I think are good. And then maybe I'll say one more thing, which is reading, because reading interesting stuff transports you into a whole different line of thinking, even if it's something challenging or can be something upsetting, but just something different to take your mind off whatever the immediate thing was that was bothering you.
Thank you very much, Gretchen, for that response. So I'm going to read another question from Shidiodo Ibokwe. I hope I got the name right. He said, "Hello, Gretchen. How do you show that you have these work ethics outside your current organization or when in an interview? Is it simply by stating them with your mouth? Is it enough by stating it with a word of mouth?"
Oh, that's an interesting question. It's a very difficult one. I think the earlier you are in your career, the more difficult it is to demonstrate some of your personal characteristics. So, for example, sometimes I'll see a resume where somebody says, I'm very thoughtful and data-driven, and I like solving problems. Well, that's what you say about you, but how do I know that? How do I check that? So then you have to go to what you've actually done. Okay, so imagine that you've had a job as a baker, and you've been doing that for 3 or 4 years. Well, if you're a baker, you're getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning, getting to the bakery, and making sure the bread is ready before people wake up in the morning. And if you're successful at doing that, it means that you're not oversleeping very often because nobody has any tolerance for the bread not being made. And so just inherently, okay, I worked as a baker for 4 years. To me, that means something. And so sometimes you have to describe what's involved in the work. If you're an operations person and you say, I worked at a well site for 2 years and my shift began at 6 o'clock in the morning and I was there every single day, that's data and information that tell me that you are committed, that you show up on time, that you have a pretty solid work ethic. And so I think sometimes you have to translate what you did into what the quality is so that people understand it. But just saying something like, I'm a thoughtful person, how do I know that? How can you help me agree with that? And maybe you can demonstrate that by describing the types of problems that you've solved or the types of connections you've made among coworkers to achieve harmony or something. I think it requires and analyzing what you've done, but then figuring out how to communicate it. And that's not trivial. I mean, if you work on your resume and you're trying to come up with that top line of who am I, making it descriptive and vivid and also something that people can say, oh yeah, there's, I can see why they're saying that about themselves. That's a challenging thing to do.
Thank you for your response. I hope that answers your question, Ibukwe. So another question from my side is that, can you tell us more about the AAPG SPE merger and what do you expect in the future?
Well, yeah, the AAPG SPE merger proposal was an interesting thing. I really enjoyed working with both AAPG and SPE colleagues, and we spent a lot of time thinking about what could the future look like if we worked together as a merged organization. And so we thought a lot about what is the future going to be like. And as I mentioned earlier, I think one of the realities is that even though people talk a lot about the energy transition will require ongoing use of oil and gas. So for two petroleum-focused organizations, that's an important thing to recognize. But we also realize that many of our members are working in organizations that are also transitioning. So there are companies that are looking at geothermal energy. They're looking at components of wind and solar energy to complement what they're doing in oil and gas. Many companies are looking at carbon capture, use, and sequestration, CCUS. And so many of these endeavors involve geologists and geoscientists and engineers who are expert in working in the subsurface. But thinking about different ways of doing it. Geothermal, we're typically moving water into the subsurface, heating it up, bringing it back to surface, and extracting the heat. CCUS, we're putting carbon dioxide in the ground. So there's a strong subsurface component, but we're moving different fluids in different ways. And so thinking about how we can support members in those endeavors was important. And we also recognized, and part of this is through just talking to leaders within different companies in our industry, is that there's an expectation that geoscientists and engineers will continue to work together closely. Now, I think when shale exploration began, it caused engineers and geoscientists to really begin working together much more closely. And I think companies feel like that's going to continue to be the case. We have teams of engineers and geoscientists who work together. And even when I started my career many years ago, I always worked with engineers, reservoir engineers, production engineers, drilling engineers, to do the work that was involved in the exploration projects that geologists and geophysicists were proposing. So I think the exercise of looking at the future was very helpful. Unfortunately, the merger proposal was not approved by the AAPG Executive Committee. And people ask me, well, why is that? Well, I think there are a variety of reasons. I think change is very difficult, and we were proposing some pretty significant change. A merger is a big deal. I think there was some uncertainty about, how would this new organization work? And I think one of the things that in a merger that is important to think about if you're in the leadership team is not what's in it for me, but how is this going to help the broader group? And so I was very convinced that this would be a good thing for engineers and geoscientists, whether or not I was going to be part of the leadership or not. So, and then I think one other thing is that I felt like as we were talking through this, there were certain pieces of information that we could share easily, but there were other parts that we were still working on. And so, you can't talk about some of that stuff until you've actually resolved and negotiated the details. I think sometimes people were a little impatient in expecting information that we couldn't provide. And so, I get the frustration, but I also think that waiting for a reliable answer was appropriate. So the merger proposal has been put aside for now. Personally, I'd love to see it revisited if both AAPG and SPE were interested, but I'm no longer president, so that's outside of my responsibilities. But one other thing that comes to mind as I'm talking about this is that while we were working on this proposal, one of the people in the group shared an article published in 1999 in the Oil and Gas Journal, and it was written by the person who was then the president of Landmark, and he said, AAPG and SEG and SPE should get together and form one organization. So that was 1999, and it reminded me that a lot of good ideas are not new ideas. So thanks for the question, and let me just reiterate that working with my colleagues in AAPG and SPE was a terrific learning experience and a great opportunity to think about what the future might be.
Thank you very much, Gretchen Gillis, for that explanation. So the next question that I have here is that which geosciences fields do you think are currently more relevant or the ones that offer more opportunities? What geoscience field do you think?
Oh gosh, one of the organizations that I am privileged to still be in contact with is the University of Texas at Austin Jackson School of Geoscience, which is one of the largest geoscience departments. And every time I go there, I'm amazed at the breadth of what geoscientists there are doing. There are sedimentologists and sequence stratigraphers and geophysicists and structural geologists and every single type of geology. And they're all busy. They all find interesting things to do. And one of the comments that came out in a meeting there was that all of the big problems of society have their roots in geoscience, whether it's energy or water or clean atmosphere or minerals or, all of this stuff in some way connects with geology. So as I said, I think there are still going to be good opportunities in oil and gas. I think with people talking more about electrification and electric vehicles, finding more mineral resources is going to be important. I think geothermal energy is still very important, and that can be in both sedimentary and non-sedimentary rocks. So the full spectrum of igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary petrology is important. I think we all kind of figure out what we like, and just because we focus on something in our academic studies doesn't mean that we can't do other things if we're well-rounded geoscientists. So when I was getting my master's degree, I worked on Precambrian metamorphic rocks. I did some field mapping, I looked at thin sections, and so on. A lot of people in the oil and gas industry kind of wondered, why did you look at Precambrian rocks? Because they don't have much oil in them. For me, it was an interesting way to learn more geology, and I wasn't thinking about how is this going to lead to a career. It was more, how do I become a well-rounded geologist? So I would encourage you to study what you love, and then make sure that you are well-rounded and adaptable, because I think I was sort of surprised that I didn't spend my whole career doing exploration. But things happen in the industry, change happens, and you wind up doing other things. And so being adaptable winds up being really important. And in fact, I was talking to some young professionals in geology the other day, and they said geology is important, but you have to have a second skill, whether it's data analytics or knowing a lot of engineering or something. For me, my second skill is writing. That was what really has kept me employed for so long. But I think, knowing what the opportunities are in different parts of the world, I can't speak specifically to that. But I think being a geoscientist and being well-rounded and adaptable will help.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the answer. So, while doing your geoscience, you have to acquire other skills. Like right now, I think in the industry, Python programming is really relevant right now. So it's very important that you incorporate that into your other skills that you can acquire. And apart from that, you can do writing. You don't have to do programming because everyone is doing it, because not everyone will actually be a good programmer. So you don't have to. There are other things that you can do. Like Gretchen has said, you can improve your writing skills, and it is very important in all professions. So I have another question from my side. The question says, what career advice would you provide students and young professionals who want to follow in your footsteps? How did you find the experience of achieving leadership positions?
So I would say in organizations like AAPG, following in my footsteps is not that difficult. You find something that you like to do where you're willing to spend volunteer time doing it, and just keep after it. So for me, I began working on the publications committee because I really wanted to learn more about the publishing process and writing and editing, because that was a complement to the work I was doing in my daily employment. But because I showed up for meetings and I was willing to take minutes, eventually I became the vice chairman and then the chair, just because I kept showing up and doing some work. That eventually led to my work as AAPG editor. And then I kept going with different aspects of what AAPG does, volunteering for a conference committee, working with GeoScienceWorld, and so on. So every time I finished a volunteer job, I tried to pick another job that I thought would be a logical next step. And I always tried to find something that was a little more responsibility or a little more challenging. So, I think if you want to volunteer, you need to just make that known politely and persistently to the leadership of the organization. And then if you're given an opportunity, do your best, because I think if you're successful as a volunteer, your reward is to get more work. In my day job, I'm not sure that I would recommend following in my footsteps, just because it's been kind of a roller coaster with ups and downs in the industry. I made strategic choices to change jobs when I thought layoffs might be coming, because I was always terrified of being laid off. And so that hasn't happened yet. But I haven't always been working as a geologist, hands-on working with data. And some people wouldn't enjoy that. I have, but that may not be what you would find interesting. So, as far as your professional career, I think taking the best opportunity you can and learning from it and building your skills so that you can advance is the advice that I would give today.
Thank you very much for the answer. So it's very important that you show up and try to feel in the role that you think inspires you and you have interest in. So we have another question from Ogu Madwa Bushi. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. He said, "Hi Gretchen, how can the association help prospective students gain admission as well as assistantship in the US and in the Canada?"
Okay, so I'm assuming this question is about placement in universities.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think the main role of the associations would be networking opportunities, because I don't think they directly work with universities to achieve any placements. But by volunteering or networking through these organizations, you can meet people. And one of the things that I found is that most people enjoy talking about where they went to university. And there's often, if you're able to attend a conference, often the university will have some sort of gathering where you can meet people. So one way to do that is sometimes you can look through the member database and identify people who have been to the university that you're interested in. Or you can look at the publications to see who has recently, which recent authors have attended that university and what they're doing. You can also use LinkedIn, for example, to find people who have gone to the university that you're interested in. Now, I think one of the things that I advise is to be gentle in your approach. So if you're interested in networking with somebody about the university they attended or where they are on the faculty, I think developing some rapport with that person is important. Occasionally, I get very aggressive contacts from people saying, I want to go to this university or I want to work for this company, and I won't take no for an answer. Now, on the one hand, saying I won't take no for an answer sometimes means that they're really committed, they're very convinced. On the other hand, if I don't know you and you say to me, I won't take no for an answer, that can appear to be a little bit threatening. So I think there's a need to get to know a person, even if it's virtually, before you start asking for advice or support or direct intervention or connection. And as I tell people, I think networking really should begin locally with people you can actually meet with. And then if things move ahead, then networking with people remotely is okay. But I think you need to start at the local level first with people who actually know you in person. So for me, that would be, going to a meeting of the Houston Geological Society and go to the meeting, talk to the person sitting to my left, talk to the person on my right, get to know them. And then if I see you in a few weeks, I can say, well, the last time we talked, I told you I was really interested in the University of Texas or whatever it is, and remind them and then pick up the conversation. But to, I would say to be gentle in your approach so that you don't scare anybody off. I hope that makes sense. And I'm not accusing anyone. I just, I've experienced that in the past, and I try to advise, getting to know somebody before you ask for them to spend a lot of time helping or advising.
Thank you so much, Gretchen Gillis. I think it's very important to know how to network, not just just through things that people that you're just meeting, you don't even have any relationship with them, and you're already asking them for favors. So it's very important to know how to build relationships. So thank you for that.
Yes, you're welcome. Actually, if you look in my LinkedIn profile, I wrote an article with one of my Aramco friends on that topic, and I've probably published it at least once, maybe twice, but it's in my profile somewhere.
Okay, ma'am. I'll check that out and share it with other people also. So I have a question from Josina. Josina says, "Hi Gretchen, thank you for your answer. I would like to know if the energy transition occurs so rapidly, then can we move to unconventional resources such as shale gas and gas hydrate for energy?"
That's a really interesting question. I think some people, I think that the energy transition is a progression through different sources of hydrocarbons, like you've stated, potentially shale gas. I think other people think that it's, we're moving to electric cars and we're getting rid of coal and a much more aggressive perspective. I personally think that a transition is something that takes time. And from what I'm reading and hearing, I think it really is it is going to be expensive. And part of it is, I think, the energy transition, to be just, needs to make sure that people have access to energy. And one of the things that we forget sometimes is not everybody has access to energy or enough energy. I mean, there are places where you don't have electricity 24 hours a day. And so making sure that the energy transition doesn't deprive people who need energy, I think that's a matter of social justice. But then I think to move to cleaner forms of energy, yeah, I think that's smart. I think conserving limited resources is smart. I think we have some very interesting times between COVID and the invasion of Ukraine, where energy supplies have been disrupted and prices have been disrupted. We have the opportunity to think carefully about the resources that we're using. And so, I'm sitting in downtown Houston and I'm looking at the highway, and people drive big cars, and a lot of the cars have only one person in them. And that uses so much energy. If we would just use smaller cars and not drive so much, or have 3 people in the car with us, that would save a lot of energy. So we have to be willing to do that. There's even now discussion about the impact of eating a vegetarian diet. Would that help reduce our carbon footprint? Well, I need to do some reading to see if that's actually, how would that work? But I think history has shown that humans always get better at being more efficient, and I think within the oil and gas industry that we have become way more efficient. But I think this is a really complicated problem. And I think the energy transition in Houston is way different from the energy transition in other parts of the world. Because things work differently in different places. So I think, I'll just express the hope that we continue to do better as geoscientists, as humans, as people in the energy industry. I think we're heading towards a better future.
Thank you Thank you, ma'am, for your response. So I think the energy transition is very everyone has a role to play. We all have a role to play in the energy transition, and it has to be sustainable, affordable, and reliable. For example, in Nigeria, we have energy poverty. In fact, I can say that we don't have 24-hour supply of electricity, and it is really bad. So, and the world is moving. The world is moving, and people are talking about reaching net zero by 2030. But Nigeria, I don't really know what's going to happen because we are not. Although people say we don't contribute up to 4% to the general emission now, but I think apart from the emission that we contribute from industries, from petroleum industries and other industries, we need to also talk about energy access. So it's very important. It's very important for economic growth and the development of nations. So the last question I have here from my side, I think you've talked about that before, but can you also still, say something, just summarize what hard and soft skills do you think junior geoscientists need to develop?
Okay, that's a fantastic question, and so the first thing I'll jump on is skills. And one of my younger mentors in SEG talked with me about skills because I asked her to help me with a presentation I was giving, and I said something about hard skills and soft skills, and she said, "No, skills are skills." And I really valued that comment because it's true. I mean, we have technical skills, we have communication skills, and so on. And as I was saying earlier, sometimes it's not the technical skills that decide your success. Sometimes, sometimes just being able to show up on time, the skill of punctuality, can be really important. So, I think we're as geoscientists, we're always expected to continue developing our technical skills, whether that's learning about new specialties in geoscience. Okay, I'm going to learn about sequence stratigraphy. I'm going to take a short course for a week, and then I'm going to learn how to apply that to my data. I mean, that's an example of building your technical skills. But I think, there's always new software or new versions of software coming out. So being able to learn those kinds of things is important. Software is a tool, so it's, we should be able to do that. But we should always also be working on our personal characteristics. Showing up on time, listening, following directions, mentoring as we grow more experienced. Being a mentor is important. Being a supportive colleague, learning how to give constructive feedback. I think all of these things we're constantly working on because we're what my trainer used to call a work in progress. I can go to the gym and do all kinds of exercise today, but if I don't keep doing that, I'm not going to be physically fit. So maybe we need to take the approach that all of these skills are part of us being works in progress, and we have to always continue to develop them. I have my own bias about the importance of writing and communication. I think there are other people that would say, continuing to develop programming skills, like you mentioned, would be important. And I think part of it is, what are we interested in doing, and what are we kind of pushed to do in whatever experiences we're having. My job I don't think anyone's waiting for me to become a programmer, so I'm not worried about that. But they do expect me to be a good mentor and to give excellent feedback. So that's something that I'll continue to work But I think in closing, what I'd like to say is that I've really enjoyed your questions. I am happy to follow up with people if I have not adequately answered specific questions. I hope I have the opportunity to meet you in person someday, whether that's possibly at the Image event that AAPG and SEG are hosting. But I wish you great success, and I appreciate your questions and your attention.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It has really been a great session with you. I'm very grateful for you. You know, we get supposed to get this session done on Thursday, but because we had technical issues and you understood it perfectly, so we are really grateful for that. So, our audiences, if you don't have any question, I want to announce that we have come to the end of July session of Ask Me Anything, and there's going to be another session of Ask Me Anything in August. So stay tuned. Thank you very much, Gretchen Gillis. Thank you.
Thank you.